afford.
COVID cases among children are back on the incline. This as many children prepare to head back to school in just a few weeks. Between July 8th and July 15th, more than 23,000 COVID cases were confirmed among children, leaving some medical experts saying that we should be putting our masks back on and leaving a lot of parents concerned about what to do. Take a listen at what happened during an interview that Anderson Cooper did on this topic.
Last few months, we have, according to independent research, saved millions of people from hospitalization and hundreds of thousands of people from COVID-related deaths because of the vaccination effort. So while we are seeing spread, what we are not
seeing...
Sir,
I get that, but there's half the country who are vaccinated, and I'm one of them, and I have a small child, and I want to know, do I need to wear a mask because a whole bunch of my fellow Americans are choosing not to get vaccinated, and if I get infected, am I going to pass it on to my child? And I haven't been able to get a straight answer on whether or not I'm a danger to my own child if I get infected. So should I wear a mask?
So, Anderson, I'm glad you asked, and you and I are in the same boat. I have two small children as well. They're 3 and 4. They're too young to get vaccinated, and I'm worried about their health too. So here's how I'm thinking about it. I know that if you're fully vaccinated like you and I are, our risk of both getting sick and transmitting it to our children is low. But if you're in an area where there's a lot of infection, or if you're worried about that risk of transmission, then wearing a mask, especially in indoor settings when you go out, is the right thing to do. That's what I do. Because again, I want to take every possible measure to protect my child, even though the risk is low. Given that I live in an area where there's a lot of virus being transmitted, I want to be extra cautious. And so that's what I do, and that's what all parents can do, is take that extra step. And I think, look, with COVID spreading with this Delta variant, it bears being cautious because this is being transmitted at a far higher rate than other versions of COVID-19.
Ben, Anthony, I know you are both fathers. How have your families been thinking about this issue since we know that children are still too young to get the vaccine?
Well, we are taking the same precautions as if we were pre-vaccine era for that same reason. We sat down as a family and committed that we weren't going to get the virus. There are too many possibilities. My daughter was born premature, 1.5 pounds, at 24 weeks, and so earliest of, one of the earliest of the earliest, and she is doing fine generally, but she still has possible lung complications that we don't want to risk. And this conversation isn't just centered in our home family. We have the same issue as we make decisions as ministers to go back to in-person worship service. As long as there's a segment of our community that cannot get vaccinated, we're taking the extra precautions that was spoken of in your clip. And so we're very much masking up in public places. Now when we're outside, we're relaxed around in our bubble. And if we're outside, we're just following those precautions, but we are definitely masking up, especially as this Delta variant is definitely more virulent. And we've had a few encounters of folks and have had to quarantine and test, but we are taking those precautions seriously.
Yeah. Likewise, we are still taking this or trying to keep it up at the same level as we were at the beginning of the pandemic. In that clip with Anderson Cooper, he was speaking to the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. And I'm listening to Anderson as he's asking the real questions. And I noticed that sometimes our leaders are not forthcoming. And I know that's an understatement, but we're talking about lives here. We're talking about lives to the tune of 630,000 that are dead so far. And the absurdity of this entire moment, like the absurdity of it all, that we're having these juvenile conversations about what precautions are we willing to take to protect our lives. I thought we had an inherent innate desire for survival, but we're seeing behavior patterns coming from people who run this country that suggest that maybe they don't have self-preservation at heart.
Absolutely. And I thought it was interesting. Anderson Cooper, who he tends to be pretty conservative, and he interrupted the U.S. Surgeon General there and inserted his question about his child, because
Mm,
that is what is on the mind of so many parents. It's likely going to be months before there is a vaccine that is approved for children under 12 to take. And until then, they are at risk. They remain vulnerable. And to your point, Anthony, I think you highlighting this really put it in perspective. Until there's a right now there's a portion of our population that can't get vaccinated. For children, it's not a choice of whether they want to; they simply cannot. There's not a vaccine that is there for them, and it seems very concerning that many of these children are supposed to be going back to school in a few weeks. And let's say a child does get it and that population
mm.
is not vaccinated and we don't have mask mandates, then we are putting our children at risk of being a part of an outbreak.
Mm.
Well, I think it's interesting. Unfortunately, we are in a space where a portion of a segment of our society is so concerned about the browning of America, about all of these other issues that are made political, right? That are put into the political sphere because it seems to be the only defensible place for this to stack all of this angst and concern about how our country's changing. And I say that very specifically to say that I'm fortunate that I live in a portion of Minnesota that is that the school district is going to keep masking, is going to be taking some of those precautions, and I don't have to. That's not going to be a battle that I have to worry about. So I can take that off of my worry list. And the hybrid option, the virtual option, is still going to be available to me as a parent. Especially given that many of my kids can't get vaccinated yet.
Right.
And so I'm fortunate to think about that. There are segments of this country that are, one, not going to be putting those precautions in place for schooling and are going to be penalizing parents who don't want to send their kids into those environments. It's purely because like many things, like race, like gender, like all of these issues that we keep talking about, they are pulled into the political sphere as a matter of culture, erroneously, because that's the only thing I can do to fill a void. Because what I have tied my culture to, I don't like. So I'm going to pull all these other things in there to try to make up a cultural identity. And unfortunately, this is lost to that battle in some ways, and it's ironic, and it's a weird reason to feel privileged in my area.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking, as you're discussing this, I'm thinking about my 10-year-old, my 8-year-old, and my 3-year-old. And, the only other thing that I feel is more primal than self-preservation is the preservation of our children. I mean, that's pretty primal there, right? We're going back to the very foundations of what it is to be a human being. And we're looking at a segment of society that is willing to risk the lives of their children for politics. And I think that's a direct result of the dumbing down of society that has been necessary to sustain this bloated civilization that's built on all kinds of things that we talk about on a regular basis. I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but I want to play there's a clip that I think will enhance this conversation, because now we are finally seeing Republican leadership, both political and in the media, step up and finally 630,000 lives later do what is necessary to encourage people to get vaccinated. This first clip is of Sean Hannity, who, when this thing started, and this is a relevant clip because Fox News is probably one of the most influential entities in this country, and by virtue of it being in this country, it is one of the most powerful institutions on the face of the planet. And for the longest, they have been sowing this idea that we don't need the vaccine or that we shouldn't take it seriously. And now, finally, last night, this is what Sean Hannity had to say on his show.
We've been saying, please take COVID seriously. I can't say it enough. Enough people have died. We don't need any more death. Research like crazy. Talk to your doctor, your doctors, medical professionals you trust. based on your unique medical history, your current medical condition, and you and your doctor make a very important decision for your own safety. Take it seriously. You also have a right to medical privacy. Doctor-patient confidentiality is also important, and it absolutely makes sense for many Americans to get vaccinated. I believe in science. I believe in the science of vaccination.
So finally, he admits that this is after speaking to millions of people every single night. If we really want to understand why there's so much hesitation on one side of this country to get the vaccine, we have to look at the contribution of Fox News, but also the Republican Party as an establishment. Here's another clip of Mitch McConnell, where he's essentially now coming to the table to say, hey, let's get vaccinated. Let's take a look at that.
97% of the hospitalizations in the country for COVID are unvaccinated people. It never occurred to me after 3 highly effective vaccines were developed in under a year that we'd have difficulty getting Americans to take the shots. But that's obviously where we are. I want to underscore in the strongest possible manner I can, and being very aware that it took 7 decades to come up with 2 effective polio vaccines. This was done in under 1 year. These shots need to get in everybody's arm as rapidly as possible, or we're going to be back in a situation in the fall that we don't yearn for, that we went through last year.
The Republican governor of Utah said this weekend that conservative talking heads are, quote, literally killing their supporters. Would you speak out against people who are actually speaking out against the vaccine?
I don't know how I could be any more clear than I have been. I've been saying the same thing about vaccinations all along the way. Others can say whatever they choose to say. It is not at all unclear that the way to avoid getting back in the hospital is to get vaccinated. I want to encourage everybody to do that and to ignore all of these other voices that are giving demonstrably bad advice.
Anthony in Georgia, this is markedly a market turn from the type of rhetoric we've seen over the last year, but I think the damage is already done.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that even when you look, when Trump was in office, you know, he, it felt like took this pandemic as though it was a joke. We remember him saying certain things about, was it putting Clorox or, you know, just weird things that he would say about this pandemic. But ultimately, I think the worst advice that was given was to not wear a mask. And so many Republicans who were storming around in our communities, trying to go against restaurant owners and go against cashiers at the grocery store, saying that they didn't need to wear a mask, that no one could tell them what to do. And we failed to get the pandemic under control here in our country from city to city because of that type of attitude. So it's long overdue that, you know, we hear from Republicans on this issue that are saying things that actually match up to the guidance given by CDC from the very beginning of this pandemic. And I think that prematurely we lifted the mask mandate in a lot of cities. I think it's something that we should have kept there. And had we have been more preventative, had we have been thinking more in terms of preventative measures, I don't think that we would have seen the numbers that we did, but we are where we are. And now I think we have an opportunity, now that we're seeing numbers increase, we know how to curve the numbers. So let's do what we need to do to keep our country safe and to keep our baby safe.
I want to point out, like, if you look at the maps of vaccination rates in the percentages of the population that are vaccinated state by state, it starts to look real familiar because it mirrors our political map. in many places with a few outliers. Again, I'm in a state where I'm fortunate, just like the folks in the Northeast and the folks in California, where our vaccinations rates, we're approaching 60%. And are on track. We're plateauing, unfortunately, for the issue that we're talking about right now, to the point where new PSAs are being ordered from many different state agencies and things like that to try to increase. I mean, barbershops are now the barbershop program, which is you can get your free vaccine. You can talk about it with professionals that are just posted up at barbershops now and get your vaccine at the same time. So, and I want to also underscore, what Georgia said about, that we need to stay vigilant because like lurking in those numbers are the same disparities that we talk about in every other sector. So within the Black community in Minnesota, our vaccination rates are far lower than the state totals when you disaggregate that data. And so and it's for a lot of the reasons, same reasons. There's an interesting thing that happens when we have folks giving bad information that creeps into communities through a back door. So we may not be the fox watchers that many other folks, we being Black community, may not be the fox watchers that other folks do, but there's a weird way in which this misinformation gets into community through other channels. And all of a sudden you're sitting at that same barbershop and somebody across from you is giving that same bad information that even in this case, Mitch McConnell was warning about. And so, there are these complications that are at play. I know our Women's Missionary Society in the AME Church is screaming this issue months ago, that they keep encountering as they help get folks vaccinated, right? In a place where everybody's complaining about not being in worship, and their response is, well, get vaccinated and we'd be able to get into worship. And they are encountering the same issue on the ground, and they're front line. And many nurses are trying to get that information out. There are AME doctors who are also preachers who are screaming it in his face, and they're just keep running into this same issue in places where mask mandates have been lifted. Folks are going back to quote unquote normal, and we see this virus mutate. The only other thing I'll say is one of the things that I saw from one of the nurses in our area that was trying to impress this upon a group was talking about the fact that the virus needs to spread in order to change. So we have the Delta variant because the virus was able to get across to other folks and mutate. If we stop the spread, we are also stopping the next mutation of the virus. And we may not be as lucky next time to have a variant of the virus that still is effectively fought by the vaccine that we currently have. So, I mean, these are some of the things that are just compiling again for a fall that does not look good.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to pivot here a little bit. We all know that there have been a number of wildfires that have been happening in California. Recently, there was in a very unfortunate situation. A couple decided to do a outdoor gender reveal. The one where you release the smoke, and if it's pink, it's a girl. If the smoke is blue, then it's a boy. Well, come to find out, the most recent wildfire that's happening all started after a couple decided to do a gender reveal outdoors. Take a listen at what officials are saying about this incident.
Or a pyrotechnic device that exploded. The fire started as a small fire, and then it grew completely out of control within the first few hours.
And so now that couple facing manslaughter charges. Ben, at the top of the show, you said, could you imagine starting your day, inviting your family to come celebrate your child with you, a fun gathering, and at the end of the day, you're facing manslaughter charges?
Yeah, these gender reveal parties are getting dangerous. I mean, we've seen all kinds of unfortunate things happen because all of the fad of doing a gender reveal party. And of course, it has nothing to do with the gathering itself, but it's like everyone is having to one up the next person, and we got this whole trend going on. And in the midst of this trend, we've seen some of the most unfortunate accidents. These things end tragically. I put this in the category of unnecessary risk. Because I can't imagine making a decision to do something to be happy about the coming baby, only to have it end with the day where I'm charged with manslaughter. And I don't mean to chuckle at their unfortunate situation, but it's the absurdity of that possibility, and to have it rooted in this gender reveal phenomenon where everyone is just trying to, we're glad everyone is happy, but let's take some safety precautions here. And the fact that we have to have this conversation is kind of absurd in a very sad way.
Well, I'll just add this quick, Anthony. It makes me think about climate change. And when we talk about misinformation, right, we're very aware of how that implies to like COVID, the consumption of news. But climate change is one of those issues where you have a lot of people saying, well, you got to tell both sides, because there's a portion of the population that doesn't believe that climate change is real. So tell both sides. The reality is you go outside to do a gender reveal party, and now there's a wildfire. Climate change is real. There's not two sides to this issue. Anthony, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think one of the reasons why this is so important, particularly for, in much of the reporting, there are quotes from the folks who have to fight this wildfire. We're not only in wildfire season, and there are already warnings that were already out about the concern of wildfires in this region. But, here in Minnesota yesterday, we were hazed out. Folks had to stay indoors. It was so hazy that at about 5 o'clock, you could barely see the sun. That may be an exaggeration. You could see definitely where it was, but the haze was real. Right. And that's from Canadian wildfires that are coming down, and the haze is coming down and messing with air quality in the Twin Cities. So I think what makes this even more egregious is that the choice to do it in this way is happening in a tinderbox, in a literal tinderbox that has already been plagued, and now resources are having to move to address this, along with many other firefighters. And Georgia, correct me if I'm wrong, but did we lose a firefighter in the process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what the manslaughter charge came from.
Wow,
that's what it came from. Okay,
yeah.
Wow. And so, I think that just underscores that, we aren't paying attention to the larger thing. I think, Georgia, I think you're right on in that this isn't unconnected to the things we're not paying attention to. The only other thing I'll add is we have a COVID connection here. Gender reveal parties, because of having to be in quarantine, have as many parties and many activities have gotten bigger, riskier, because we want to be out and about. And I've noticed this. There was a gender reveal party locally where they did it as a wrestling match, right? And so there was the male, the blue and the pink, which didn't used to be the colors for boys and girls. That happened in the 1900s. Some switch happened. It used to be the exact opposite, but that's a different story. They were fighting, and the winner was going to be the one where it's revealed, right? And it was all fun and games. Except for the fact that if anybody's done your amateur backyard wrestling, you mess up, and somebody was slammed and ended up having to go to the hospital for fracturing their vertebrae in a couple of areas. But the reveal happened. So I think it's connected to our larger issues. It's connected to where we are, as a society. And I just think it's very interesting that we detach from these larger issues, and fail to see the connections. And when we do, we start to make these kinds of decisions.
This is a case, and we can wrap up here, but this is a case that I want to follow, because I want to know, just because you're charged with manslaughter doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be convicted. And I want to follow this because there's a part of me, I totally understand it, but that also feels like it's a little excessive. And I think that it's interesting that someone who has no intention on harm being done ends up being held responsible in this capacity. When you contrast that with, for example, a police killing, and we know that the intent for someone like Kim Potter was not to fatally shoot Dante Wright. She claimed that she used her taser. We had to protest and demand that she be charged with that, right? And so when you contrast this with manslaughter charges for a couple who had no intention to start a fire, who had no intention for a firefighter to lose their life, and now they're facing manslaughter charges, can't help but think it feels a little excessive.
Not only excessive, Georgia, but just reflective of who the system is designed to hold accountable. Not the powerful, but the powerless. And in this example, whether these gender reveals are caused by keeping up with the Joneses, a function of boredom of COVID-19, setting all of those factors aside, the fact that this couple could be held accountable for manslaughter and we can't get justice in so many police shootings, you're absolutely spot on.
Well, I want to thank both of you for participating in this conversation this morning. I know it always feels like there's more to say on these topics, but we are on the clock. So for those of you watching, thank you so much for joining us. Stay around for more on The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Good morning, everyone. You know who it is. Your boy Jesus Dixon is in the building. Good morning. Good morning, y'all know who it is. Good morning. Good to see everyone this morning. Grab your tea, your coffee, your juice, your drink, your smoke, whatever it is you need to get your morning started, y'all. The Benjamin Dixon Show is coming up next, followed by Like It or Not. Shout out to Georgia, man, on the clock, y'all. Make sure you stay tuned. Good morning, everyone. They say they can't hear me. Can y'all not hear me? Good morning. Oh, yeah. How's that, people? There we go. Good morning, y'all. Good morning again, y'all. Y'all make sure y'all stay tuned. While Bubba tries to get his microphone turned up some more. Like you gotta touch it and then it goes up. There you go. Chuck Diesel, what's going on, brother? Environmental Coffee House. Good morning. Laura Estrada, good morning. Tyler, brother, Sonny, what's going on? AD, Luke Kane, Six Dragon Daddy, good morning. Sister Nat, A, Justice Jaconis, what's going on? Lily Hunter, good morning. Love you too. Miss Sophia, I see you in the chat. Look, girl. Melody Dennis, good morning. Esther, good morning. Roller Dragon, good morning. Levi Del Val, good morning. Stigios, the latest games, what's going on, sister? Seven Sweetheart Alicia, y'all, good morning. Courtney, good morning. Kareem, good morning, y'all. Magdalene Moon, good morning. Shay, good morning to you. Patricia, good morning, ma'am. On and on it goes, good morning. Okay. plans. Luke Kang, what's going on, brother? Good morning. Y'all make sure that you stay tuned, and if you have not already, like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, y'all, so you know when the Benjamin Dixon Show is going down. You do not want to miss it. Good morning. Shout out to everybody on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're streaming from, Facebook, man. Good morning, y'all. Hit that like button for me. Love y'all. Mean it.
Yeah, look, I'm in line with the stars. I'm in sync with the earth. 10 toes deep, flower child from the turf. I never switch sides. Like, even when I die, I'm a ride for the squad. Let her ties in the hearse. I've been on the vibe, kind of hard to describe. I'm in between, I'm good and it's fine, but I'm tired of the grind. Then I come alive in the night to realize I'm in
Ghost Doggy TV, good morning. OG Landshark, good morning. Afro Puff, good morning, y'all. Shout out to my Twitch people, man. I love y'all.
Do that, I survived doing 80 to the house.